What's going on, folks? Can you hear me? Um, trying something different, so bear with me. I hope I can hear Ria when she comes on. What's happening? Basically, gonna hang out with Ria and talk about some things. All right, let me see if I can hear her. I see her camera just came online. I can hear this Godfrey clip I'm playing. I had to play anything just to see if I can hear. So it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. Let's see here. Let's see here. Let's see here. I'm gonna try and add her to the stream. Hey Ria, what's happening?
Hey, Ive, how's it going? Can you hear me?
I can loud and clear. That's perfect. Perfect. Perfect.
Alrighty.
Nice. What's up? How's the day to you?
Well, you want to know some? It's a little cold. I just came back from a big ham radio convention in Orlando, Florida, and
Really?
I'm here back in cold New Jersey. So what can I say?
Fun times. It actually wasn't as cold here today. It was kind of nice. I'm in, I guess, Western PA, and I was
Okay.
watching one of your streams and you kind of mentioned that you were close to Eastern PA. You know what I mean? That was a whole thing. That was an interesting thing you were talking about as it relates to Eastern PA. Fun times. Fun times. I enjoyed it. I was watching a couple of your streams. I had a good time listening, learning some things about you and your personality and all that jazz. All right, let's get right into it. I have some notes around here somewhere.
Hmm.
Let me just pull them up. At least let me try to. So I've been aware of Ria's channel for a while. I don't know how I came across your channel, but she runs a channel. It's called Ria's Shack Ham Radio. She talks about ham radio amongst many other things like power stations, electronics, and some other topics. I read her about page. It says she's originally from Trinidad and Tobago, and she's now in New Jersey. And her ham call sign is N2RJ. Is there any significance to that, or is it just they assigned it to you?
No, this is a vanity call sign. So RJ are my initials, and N is one of the prefixes for the United States, and two is a prefix for New Jersey and New York. So
Ah,
and United States, two New Jersey, New York, RJ my initials. They normally assign a long call sign, but
okay,
I shorten one because I have the highest class license, so I'm eligible to do that.
nice, nice. She is also a moderator in the EcoFlow group and is
Yeah.
quite familiar with the product line. So should be a good conversation. Let's see what these comments are snapping and trapping about. Hey Tina, what's up, Beats? 2% MJ, good to see you. Joe Tyson, brother Joe, what's happening? All right, Joe Tyson has a call sign. Look at him. Is that what that is? That's a call sign, right? That's what
Yeah,
he's
this is
putting
call
there.
sign.
Nice, 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 nice. And then Dominique Unique says it should be very interesting. I've always known about ham radio, but never knew anyone who did it and how it works. So Ria has she has a video on her channel about like it's like an introduction to ham, which I really enjoyed. And I've noticed a trend that you say in your lives a lot, like you like to teach and allow people to learn. So that video was very educational. I'm gonna get the link and put it around here somewhere in a moment. If not, I'll put it after the live is over. So, anything you want to share about your channel and how you got started, or anything you want to introduce to the community?
Well, sure. I have Ria Shackham Radio as my channel. I'll tell you the story in a little bit, but basically, I teach about ham radio. I teach about other radio communications, and I teach people how to be prepared. I teach people how to to legally use their radios, and also ways to get on the air and communicate and make sure they have that backup safety. But also, ham radio is a fun hobby, you know and you can also help people do a lot of things. So I really, really enjoy the hobby. This is my 25th year in ham radio,
Wow,
and I'm really happy to be in it. I have a great
nice.
community.
Nice. Yeah. I when I was watching your lives, seeing the people you engage with and all that jazz, it's a fun time. It's especially fun to have that both that online community and then I assume you have the offline community too of the people you kind of hang out with. Have you ever gotten to hang out with any of the people that are in your YouTube lives on the regular?
Oh, absolutely. So, like I said, we had a convention in Orlando called Orlando Hamcation, which is a big. It's one of the bigger ones. And then I went down there. Actually, so I'm also a director of the National Association ARL, the American Radio Relay League, and I went
Hmm.
down there to rep them. But yeah, I hung out with a lot of my YouTube friends, some of my fellow creators like uh, Josh, Ham Radio Crash Course, Ham Radio 2.0, and then the smaller ones, like Tank Radio and these other guys. So I also met up with Hank Strange. I don't know if you know him. He's getting into ham radio. And I met up with a few others. So I met up with a lot of people. Yeah.
I've never I've never gotten into ham radio. I don't think I've ever even watched a video until I came across your channel and kind of noticed that that was you that's what you were talking about. So
Mm-hmm.
I barely know anything about it, barely. So if you want to, can you give us a brief introduction to what it is and what you use it for and kind of like, all the things.
Sure. Yeah, I see a lot of people asking about costs and stuff like that. We'll get into that in a little bit probably. But so ham radio is basically it started way back in like basically before radio even existed, right? There were people who were experimenting with radio. There was no official ham radio back then, and amateurs they did this for the love of it. So you're doing radio communications for the love of it. Okay, so you love radio. And there are many aspects to it. There's the tech, which is a big thing. There is also the social aspect. You meet a lot of friends. There is the preparedness aspect. You have communications when the grid are down, which is some of the same reasons you admit it, right? That you like power stations because it's going to be there when the grid goes down.
Right.
So we have
Absolutely.
communications when the cell phone go down. So yeah, so that is ham radio. We have access to a lot of different types of radio communication. We do voice, we do Morse code, we do digital. We could send email. We could do all sorts of communication. We could even
Hmm.
talk with astronauts on the space station. Later
Really?
this month,
Wow.
I'm going to be helping a school do a contact with the space station.
Wow. Wow, that's interesting. That's interesting. So I don't know if you want to talk about the cost, but do you have an opinion about like ham radio versus, dot dot dot, so on and so forth?
So I tell people, it's all about the right tools for the job, right? So let's start with ham radio versus because that's an easy question to answer. Ham radio versus CB. They're two different things. CB is more of a utility communication that a lot of truckers use, right? It's big in the truck community, so they use that to talk amongst themselves, and they can actually pass commercial traffic and such like that. Ham radio is non-profit, meaning that you can't make money, you can't use anything to make money on ham radio. So
Hmm.
so that's the biggest thing. Ham radio versus CB, you have access to a lot more frequencies, a lot higher power. Okay, and one of these videos, I'm going to show you my EcoFlow setup, my big EcoFlow setup, powering my big ham radios. You're
Nice.
gonna watch out for that. But that's the other thing. We get access to a lot of different modes. Like I said, we could do the satellites. We could do, you know, all the stuff. And ham radio versus FRS and GMRS, which are the other type of radio. This is a GMRS radio, by the way.
Okay.
This so basically versus those, I mean you have a lot more frequency bands, meaning that you can actually do a lot different types of communication with different characteristics. Like some bands will go far, some bands will be just for local communications, and then some of them are just really, short range communication, all sorts of esoteric things, and you could even bounce signals off the moon. So how about that?
I think about it in terms of like cell phones and spectrum. I saw in one of your lives you were talking about the FCC and how there's this challenge because the cell phone carriers are like buying up the spectrum and they kind of eat into the ham spectrum. So that's kind of what helps me to understand bands and things like that. We got an
Mhm.
unhappy one. So, geez, man, he's going hard in the paint.
It's
I don't
okay.
know if you watch my lives, but this is
I
what
do.
my
I do.
lives are
You know
like.
what? I have listen, my kids are 11, but they used to be, it used to be rough.
I got you. I got you. So if there's I so when I think about ham radio, I think about you talk about this like wide range of possibilities. And it's like you also mentioned the right tool for the job. Like me myself, the best thing the most important thing to me is like maintaining communication with my wife and my neighbors and things like that.
Hmm.
So I never think about ham radio as a reasonable option. I also think that as an introvert, I don't know if I want to be in touch with a whole bunch of people. So it's like ham radio just feels like very like wide scale. Is that in a situation where say, something happens, we know like the grids are connected. There's like the eastern one and then the western one, and then Texas has its own thing going on. So if the grid was to go down, ham radio seems to be a feasible communication tool for kind of relaying information on a grander, a bigger scale. Is that pretty much how it comes down?
Kind of. So I did miss one thing, the cost. So these little radios could go for as little as $25. And then some of them you could get really, I mean, the sky is the limit. I know people who have set up radio for, I don't know, hundreds of thousands to $1 million and change.
Oh,
Like they have like big antennas and stuff like that. But you don't need, I mean, you could go simple. I have a radio in a backpack here that didn't cost all that much. But yeah, as far as when the grid goes down, certainly it does provide a means to communicate, and this is the most important part. You can communicate without infrastructure, meaning
mm-hmm.
that you don't need a cell tower, you don't need Verizon, you don't need AT&T, you don't need T-Mobile, you don't need nobody. Okay?
Yeah, yeah.
All you do is just radio to radio, and the technical knowledge that you teach, even if you're not a techie, you have to learn some. The things you learn allow you to be a radio MacGyver, so to speak.
Mm,
You know what I'm saying?
that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's really interesting to think about that. So is it a situation where when we're talking about ham, does ham have the stuff with the repeaters and bouncing and is that what that is? Because I watch like a lot of like wilderness shows and I remember it was maybe like Life Below Zero, like Next Generation or something. And one of the young ladies was in like a valley and her boyfriend kind of worked on the other side of the mountain and they had like a little relay thing. And I don't know if that was ham or if it was something else. Does that kind of make sense to you? Does that sound like a ham radio setup?
Can I get started on Hollywood?
Sure. Well, it wasn't Hollywood in defense of, but I guess it kind of is because it's a produced show. So go
I
ahead,
know.
please
I'm
start
saying
start in on Hollywood.
Hollywood frequently gets amateur radio wrong. Okay,
Okay.
they put all sorts of and they get all radio communications wrong. Fun fact: the world's greatest Christmas movie, Die Hard. Okay, they were using they seem to have they were using CB communicators. I looked at those radios. Those are ham radios. Okay,
Mm,
they just found some. I guess they found something in a shop. Say, okay, we're gonna use this as props.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So Hollywood, a lot of Hollywood, they might try to, and it's a lot of other things. So like even if you talk to computer hackers, and they talk about hacking, a lot of shows get hacking wrong. You don't have like these big displays. So, long story short, yes, yes. Hollywood tries to portray amateur radio. There are very, very few that get it correct. One of the ones that get it correct was Last Man Standing. And I don't only say that because they let me visit their set. I actually went to the studio and I operated their amateur radio station on the set just before they
What
were
was
taping.
Last Man Standing?
So Last Man Standing was a sitcom with Tim Allen and a
Oh, okay,
few
cool.
others.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
Yeah, yeah. So it was basically he was a rugged outdoorsman, and he was involved in ham radio because that's what people do.
I do not remember seeing any instance of ham radio on Last Man Standing, and my wife and I watched it somewhat faithfully. So it goes to show you how much it was on my radar. Do you remember that day seeing Tim Allen in Last Man Standing doing any like type of communications? I know he had the vlog and the computer
Hmm.
stuff, but I don't remember him communicating over radio. I just remember him giving Obama a hard time.
Well,
I love it. I love it. I love all of it. I'm here for all of it, all the political incorrectness. But that's pretty interesting. So you talked about people have asked about expense and cost.
mhm.
So I guess we can kind of transition to that.
So yeah, so let's get started with the license, right? So you have three classes of license in the United States, right? Because remember, this is a worldwide hobby. You have the technician, which is the base level. You have the general, which is like the mid level, which gives you most of the privileges you need. Then you have extra, which is the highest level. So the base level technician actually, if you get like I don't have one here with me, but if you get a handheld radio like this, right? This is a handheld ham radio. This is not a cheap one. They have more expensive ones for like $25, like the Baofeng. Okay, like a Baofeng GT5R, right? They are the cheapest ham radio you could buy. They're $25, right? You get that. You can actually talk with people locally on local, usually through local repeaters. I know you mentioned repeaters. A repeater is a station up on a mountaintop which takes a signal in and then rebroadcasts it down. So, you could extend your distance. A lot of people do that as their first, and some people that's all they stay with, you know. Then you could get into the more expensive kind of radios. I think I have one here. You get into the HF communication, right? And a lot of people, what they're doing these days is they're going out to parks. So I have this radio, which is a HF radio in a backpack, and these start out at like probably like $1,000, $1,200, but you could get cheaper, you could get used ones, and then you could get on the bands that allow long distance communications. So I could get on here. Um, Beyond that, really, you could get bigger and bigger, but a lot of people are happy with like spending maybe like anywhere between $25 to $1,000 worth of gear. And for antennas, they build antennas out of scrap wire. So that's pretty that's pretty interesting.
So is there one thing I can't get past? Like, if I ever got into it, I would get one of the handheld radios because
Hmm.
as I get older, I kind of shake this idea of things being sleek and svelte, but I like my portability. I like my compactness. So I would probably go that route. Is there any application where ham works for like RVers or people who want to get on the road? Because we talking about antennas, and then I know there's like transmission power, and I was kind of checking out your Tesla video and talking about powering it. So what is there any application there, or would they be better served by CB or walkie talkies?
So yeah, the Tesla video, I'm actually working on the part two and part three to complete it. So as far as RVs are, it's popular with a lot of RVers in a lot of circles. In fact, there is a RV ham radio event called Quartz Fest, and that just recently concluded in January. And that basically is like the RV life with ham radio, and they have it on at Quartzsite, near Quartzsite, and so it's kind of it's a real interesting thing. I've never been, but a colleague of mine actually in the National Association, he's been there. So RVers use it while they're underway. Some of them use it while they're parked, and then a lot of them now use it while they're boondocking. So let's say you go in a remote place, that's your lifeline to the world. I mean, now you're going to have things like, I guess, Starlink is going to come to that, right? But, some of them, they
Yeah.
have radio, they could talk to people, they could even send email. So,
Is so in I guess in a practical situation, would you see someone kind of using ham to tap into like more mainstream communication, like you one ham to another ham, and then that ham has cell phone reception, so he can relay a message to an actual person via digital means over a cell phone? Do you see stuff like that in the community, or is it more so like we're just talking, and that would be I guess is that a niche kind of application of ham radio?
Yeah, so that's what you call traffic handling and third party traffic, right? So third party traffic is somebody is you're sending a message to somebody who's not a radio ham, and that happens. That happens quite a lot. It used to happen more often, and specifically if or do you know anybody in the military or who's a veteran, specifically in like older veteran?
Not intricately that they would be
Okay.
talking about ham or communications or anything like that.
Yeah. So, all right. So basically, you could send messages to other people in a few ways. You could use an application called WinLink, and
Okay.
WinLink will allow you to send email to anybody. Right. You could use something called APRS and send text messages to any cell phone over radio. So this radio has the capability to send text messages to cell phones. You can
Hmm.
also go ham to ham, but back in the old days, the not so old days, in like the 80s and 90s, we had, before cell phones were in wide use, we had a facility called the Auto Patch, which is where the local repeater had a phone attached to it, and you could then dial up on the keys here, the number keys, right, and make a phone call, order a pizza, okay,
Hmm.
and yeah, you pay to join a local club, of course, to maintain the phone lines and such. Back in the old days, why I asked about veterans is that I have veterans in my family, but they're like my brother's in the Navy, but they're not from that generation. He was in Afghanistan and he had Skype and he used to Skype me and stuff, so it was really not there. Back in the old days, the troops used to call home on ham radio. Okay, so what happens is you have an affiliated service called MARS, right? The Military Affiliate Radio Service, and what they would do is they would call overseas radio amateurs who are stateside, right? And then we would patch into the phones. We'd make a phone call to their family, to the wife and kids. Um, I don't think there were many women in the military at that time, right? But they what happened was then these troops would call home and send messages and all of that stuff. But even during disasters, they do that sometimes. But a lot of times during disasters, what they do is they actually do health and welfare messages. Like for example, in Puerto Rico, they actually they were taking reports of people of whether people were still alive basically and how they're doing and sending it to relatives back home, because we have a big Puerto Rican community here in New York and New Jersey and Florida too. So yeah,
I
you mute. You're on mute.
I thought I was muted, and anyway, I find myself wondering how many devices do you have related to like ham radio? Is it is it a ton? Do you keep upgrading them? Do you give them away? Do you keep them for different reasons? Like how does that work?
So me personally,
Hmm.
I'll tell you something. I actually have an I my main radio right now is basically computer based, right? It's a software defined radio,
Okay.
and it's a box that sits on my desk in a room. I'm actually going to move it to a rack. Um, you know, provided I get space for it. Things are in my house, but I know that's permission. But anyway, the well, I use a main radio now. I have a few other older radios. Sometimes I lend out to new people at my stage in life. I wanna help people who are now getting into this. So I might lend out to somebody who just got licensed and then they return it back or they pass it on to the next person. I have the capability to access my radio from my cell phone here. So if I'm on, you know, I can log into my radio here. I can bring it up. I hope it comes up. Yeah, you know, and I can show you it here. I'm trying to bring up a band that has activity on it. See here, you can see this is the radio. You probably even
Let's
hear it too,
see.
you know? So yeah. Oh, hello Siri. Goodbye Siri. Siri always messes up everything.
Oh yeah, well you could carry that easily
You
enough.
see?
Yeah, that's not too bad.
Oh, where did I go?
I'm still here. I don't
Okay.
know how to keep it so it shows you.
Okay.
Adapter on it. Oh yeah.
So anyway, so this is it, right? So yeah, so I have that. That's a great company. That's
Wow.
Flex Radio. They make a lot of great radios. Now they're actually in some defense work where they're using radios to control predator drones and such like that. I mean, you know, whatever you think of that, I think it's cool tech. Um, Other than that, you know, I try to like occasionally I might go out to the swap meets and sell off some older stuff just because I don't want to clutter. And you know, I want to sometimes I want to keep the house neat, you know, which is a challenge. Yeah.
I don't know if we missed this. Did we talk about the cost for licensing or did we just give the tiers?
Ah, right. So the licensing. So right now the licensing is free. The exam might cost up to $15 to take, depends on who you take it with. Some of them are free. The the FCC is going to start charging $35 sometime in the future.
Hmm.
It could be this year, it could be next year, it could be never. But they actually have a law that says that they need to charge fees. So they're going to start charging $35 for 10 years. Okay? And the license is good for 10 years. And then after that, you just renew. You do need to take a test, right? But the good news is the test, you can actually, there are a number of sites to study with, and you get the actual questions and answers beforehand. It's not open book, but you can memorize the whole thing and pass quite
Okay.
easily. So,
Interesting. So I am curious about one thing. Like, why is ham radio important to you? Like, in terms of real life application, futuristic implementations of things. Like, what would you say is the reason why it's kind of near and dear to you?
you want to know? I'll show you. I never intended to be involved as a radio amateur at all. I didn't, you know, like you, I'm an introvert, okay? But this is my jam, okay? I
Okay.
started building this thing, and I actually have an ongoing build on my channel. I like to build things. I like to make things, you know, and I love the tech. So I kind of got roped in it. I had a teacher who introduced me to ham radio because I was always into that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And I got involved in there, and then I figured out the other aspects, the social aspects and stuff like that, you know. So, you know, it's kind of like, yeah, you know, that's why I got into it. Uh, it has been helpful in the career, to some degree, but to be honest, where I am now in my career, not really. It did help in college because you know, I did electrical engineering in college, and it's you know, it's been a nice ride. You know, it's something to do. It's never too old to get involved, and I
So
got
it's
involved
more
as a
hobby
teenager.
than like function at this point for you.
For me, yeah, it's more hobby than function to me. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. We'll see if there's any questions related to it. There's not much going on in the chat. We have an attentive bunch, so when they're listening, they're not typing a whole lot. I know LVP asked, what types of stations are there? I think that kind of goes to the bandwidths and things like that. I think you mentioned stations. Does that ring a bell for you in terms of something you could speak to?
So, what kind of station? I guess that's a broad question. So, you can have like, you know, you could have station in a car, you could have a handheld station, you can have a station in your house, you know, you could have a portable station in a park, It's kind of a broad question. I would say that it's all two-way radio communication, right? But there's all different kinds. There's computers, there's pictures, there's voice, there's Morse code, there's chat, you name it.
So how would one? It's funny you mentioned this idea of sending text messages to phones. I remember when I was younger, I always kind of wanted one of those two-way pagers, the fancy one that all like rappers had. But I had one of the like more dumbed down ones. It was like a Motorola Talkabout, something like that. And I could send messages to my friends' cell phone accounts because you know how back then they probably still do, but carriers had like your phone number at bzw.messaging.com or whatever. So you could actually email a text message to a cell phone and it would be delivered into their inbox. How do you send an email via ham radio? Is it like some software involved or how does that work?
So there is a excuse me, there is a network called APRS, right? The Automatic Packet Reporting System. The guy who invented it just died actually recently. But what it does is, long story short, you can send messages through that. And one of the messages you send is to a station called SMS GTE or SMS Gate, right? SMS is short messaging service. And then you put the phone number and then you put the message body and, SMS Gate will pick that up, route it through, take the phone number, route it to the phone number. And, that's basically it.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Like it's funny because I'm really big on communication. I've always been big on communication, but I don't necessarily talk to a lot of people. But communication
Hmm.
has always been very important to me to the point where there was a couple apps that I kind of got into because I like to be able to communicate like if stuff goes down, like being from New Orleans, like we lost electricity all the time. So
Hmm.
flashlights, power, communication has always been very important to me. And this idea that you could be able to communicate when the infrastructure fails or the infrastructure is temporarily suspended is like something that I'm all about. So, hearing about these options is interesting to me. Again, I don't know if I necessarily like all the extra stuff that comes with ham radio.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know, but it's very telling. Now, is there anything you want to kind of put the cherry on top as it relates to ham radio, and then we can move into some other topics that I wanted to talk with you about?
Sure. What I'd like to say is that I'm really surprised at the amount of tech people who don't know about it. But you know what? If you're a tech person, it's a great activity to get into. If you're not a tech person, it's also a great activity to get into, and you will meet literally everybody. Literally, ham radio has. I know ham radio people who are homeless, who don't have a penny to their name, and I knew, and I've actually talked to ham radio people who are royalty, right? Um, King Hussein of Jordan was a ham radio operator,
Hmm.
and you have royalty of all sorts of people. And he used to talk to people. One of the funny things is he was on the air, and I'll leave the ham radio topic of the joke, okay? He was on the air once talking to people, and one guy say, "So there, Hussein, what do you do in Jordan?" And like, "What do you do for work?" Well, somebody
Mm.
keyed up their microphone and said, "He's the king, you moron." I think the kids are laughing. and then,
Oh my
and then
gosh.
I'm sure everybody laughed without keying their microphones.
So wait, just real quick, you mentioned something that someone else kind of chimed in on the chat, so to speak. Does it operate in a broad sense where everybody can listen? Like,
Yeah,
can you have private communications on ham or not so much?
no, encryption
Mm.
is not allowed. Private communications are not allowed. That is one of the things. I mean, it's kind of like, the government is giving you this valuable spectrum for free. So, it's kind of like everybody wants to make sure that they could make the most use of it. I'm guessing. On the other hand, sometimes it would be nice to have private conversations.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess we got to find that balance with the legislation eventually.
I just learned. I was watching a video about like walkie-talkies, and they have all of these. They call them privacy codes, but how the guy explained it is that even in that instance, there is no privacy on walkie-talkies.
No.
I never knew that. I can't speak to it in great detail. Are you familiar with that aspect of walkie-talkies? Could you speak to it?
Yeah, so the privacy codes are actually kind of a misnomer. What they are, I think they would kind of call them keys, right? So it's kind of like this, okay? You have like the key for your house, right? And you alone and maybe your spouse or kids or something have a key for the house, and only you guys could get in and get into your house.
Hmm.
Then you have a key for the washroom, for the restroom at your job, okay? Everybody in the office has a key to that restroom, right? So, you want to know something? The private codes they're talking about are like the key to the restroom, meaning that it's a code that once anybody programs into a radio, they can listen to and talk to people who are using that same privacy code. Whereas if you
Oh.
have true encryption, you alone have a key and your other partner has a key, and only both of you or multiple of you who have that same key can then talk. And it's not even encryption. Some of them, is basically like a sub audible tone that is sent along with the voice, and then the radio will hear that, right, and then open the squelch. The squelch is basically where it turns off the sound until it detects a signal. So
So I wish I could remember how they talked about it, but it was like this idea of like everybody can hear you, but you're
mhm,
tuned to hear only those two people, like those conversations. So it's not
correct.
actually private. It just blocks out all the other people from kind of talking on that sub channel or whatever. It was very interesting. I had to think it all these years that these
Yeah.
privacy codes were like, yeah, if I talk to my wife, then nobody else can hear me, but it's not the case. There you go.
Yeah. It used to be Motorola used to advertise a feature and call it private line. But what they used to do is they used to have two sets of radios sharing one frequency and one
Mm,
channel, right? And then they have
yeah.
different private line codes. So what happened is they could talk to each other and the other set wouldn't hear them. So they could kind of share the channel. That's where the term PL came from.
So there was a question from Linda Iannone. She says, "Why are they so pricey?" Well, we talked about how the cheapest one you can get, the Baofeng, is like $25. So what
Yeah.
are you talking about, Linda, as it relates to price? What are you thinking of? And
So as
then
far as
go ahead.
yeah, the yeah, it could get pricey. Like you could buy a car. You could buy a car for even a new car. Well, it used to be you could buy a new car for less than $10,000. I don't know what the price of a new car is now, but
It's not
or
ten
you could
thousand dollars.
right. Yeah.
I
So
wish.
well,
I'm kind
you
of
could buy.
spoiled in that, right? Because I remember my parents paying so little for automobiles that when I became an
Yeah.
adult, I'm like, why can't I get a payment for like $250 like them? It's because 12 cars are like 12 grand. It's like, no, they're not 12 grand anymore. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Deviation.
No, no, no worries. My first car was $10,000. It was a Honda Civic, and then it was used, but it was a Honda Civic. But
Gotcha.
the other now you could buy cars for, and so basically you can buy the basic radio for $25. You can buy some
Uh
of them
huh.
for $100. So you get the cheap radios, right? You could get, and for many people who want basic communication, that's all they need. If you want fancy and you want radios that have like all sorts of features to spectrum scopes, right, and lots of high power and stuff, then you're getting a lot of money. But prices have come down, so there is a lot, especially with the Chinese radios. So
I saw something where, and I don't know if you subscribe to this, but somebody was talking about the idea that those radios might become illegal. And I try not to
I did.
like get into that stuff, but Because sometimes it's like fear mongering and all that jazz. But what's your take on that? Do you see that as being problematic with those Baofeng radios?
So the thing about the Baofeng radios is using it outside of ham radio is illegal. But I mean, I've never really heard of the FCC prosecuting anyone. Now, I have to say, as an official of the ARRL, that I do not advocate illegal operation. Let's just say that, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But you want to know something? I don't think the FCC is really, they have bigger fish to fry. I
Yeah.
could tell you that in terms of, so I also have, I just posted a video on my channel about something called spurious emissions, right? So basically, when you key up the radio, it produces a signal, right? And somebody asked about frequency in megahertz. So the frequency
Mm-hmm.
basically is the amount of time the signal repeats, right? And 1 hertz is one cycle, and 1 million hertz is one megacycle. So it's kind of like a guitar string, you hear different notes and stuff like that, right? But so some of these radios, right, when they produce a signal on one frequency, they would also have what you call harmonics, which are multiples of the frequency, that go on other frequencies as well, generated at the same time. The problem with that is that might spill over into public safety, police, first aid squad, whatever, and then what happens is that'll be illegal operation. So the FCC in the United States has requirements for that. The old Baofeng radios used to be really terrible at that, right? And then,
Mm.
but lately, what they've done is actually they sent some people from China to come to ham radio conferences and talk to people and to make their radios cleaner. And the organization I'm with, the ARRL, actually, they work with them and they've been testing these radios, and some of them are actually quite as clean and proper as as a $500 radio, which is what I have here. So yeah,
Ah, that one's 500.
yeah,
My gosh.
that's a
I do
rare
have
radio.
a I
Yeah.
have a quick question about practicality because
Hmm.
some of the people in the community, they want to travel and get out on the road. MJ talked about BLM land. Is it practical to say, okay, well, I'm here in this particular place. Let me buy two radios, get my license and all that jazz. And then could I, within reason, be able to communicate with someone who I gave the other radio to? I know there's no privacy, but could you make that work? Is that practical? Or should you more so go into it with like you're joining the ham community versus directly communicating with a loved one?
You can do it however you want to. Okay, there
Okay.
is no wrong way to do this unless you're doing it to as a business. You can't do it as a business, right? But if you want to have personal communications, by all means, you can, you could have a radio with a friend, and two, you could talk. There are people who've been talking that way for years.
And then I'm curious about power. So we'll use that to segue into this conversation about power stations.
Hmm.
How much power does it take to run these things typically? Like if someone is in an RV or at home and the power is out, realistically, what are they looking at as far as the power draw?
So this is the battery for one of my radios. I don't know if you could see the markings in terms of lithium ion. How many?
I can see it a little bit.
Yeah, 32 watt hours, right? And then 7.4 volts, 1800 So this is a very low power radio,
Okay.
right? And that kind of, you can go low power. With these handheld radios, you can go low power, right? With the other radio I had in the backpack, you could power that off a lithium iron phosphate battery, right? A LiFePO 4 battery. You can power that, for a really long time. I have a lithium iron phosphate I carry in that bag, right? I also use it with my EcoFlow River Pro, but I've had some issues with that. But so
What issues do
you
you
can use.
have? Does it impact transmission or is it
Yeah,
feedback?
there was some interference generated by the inverter. So I
Okay.
actually quieted it down with some metal toroid, filter beads. They kind of fixed
Okay.
it, but you have to do that. I've been actually working with EcoFlow on that actually, so they've made a lot of improvements, especially with the Delta Pro. They but yeah, they consume very little power unless you're actually using very high power, right? And you can so you can consume a little bit of power or you consume a lot of power. And then a lot of people, what they do is they practice their radio craft using low power, right? And that is their jam. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
So yeah.
And this, I imagine that low power means it doesn't go as far. So they kind of like use as a,
Ah, that's the thing. I've let me tell you.
okay, okay.
So
School
you
me.
want to know something? Yes and no. So high power can mean you go far, but if you know how to use your radio properly, right? It's not the size, it's how you use it, okay? It's not the amount
Okay.
of power, it's how you use it. If you use your radio properly and you know how the Earth's atmosphere works in propagating your signal, you can go very far with just a few watts.
Hmm.
And and if you have a good antenna, okay? This is what I always tell people. Forget about the power. Get a good antenna. If you have a good antenna outside, okay, outside, right? You will extend the range of your radios. Even on these handheld radios, you get a longer antenna. It works. Hey, I know Silver Stacks Prepper.
Stacks, my man.
He was on my channel the other day.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's out. I think you're out on the West Coast, right, Stacks?
Yeah.
So his time is all crazy. It's probably, I don't know, what is it, midnight there? I don't know. I don't know. I
I
don't
don't
pay
know.
attention. So you were trying to do things on your power station. It didn't quite work out. If you're using like the lithium iron phosphate battery, do you have to wire that up directly to your station, or like how does that work?
So, yeah, so a lot of these radios run on 12 volts, right? 13.8 volts, but they run on 12 volts. And I just use an Anderson connector because we
Okay.
standardize on Anderson connectors, right? So we use the Anderson connector and plug that in, and that works with the radios. And the thing about using the battery directly versus with a power station is you don't have any conversion loss, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right.
So it's always good to do that.
Let's talk power stations. I
Yeah.
have so let's do this. My first question is it's a selfish question. I have
Mhm.
mentioned it before on my channel. I have been comparing figuratively this idea of the Costco deal on the EcoFlow River Pro with the extra battery coming
Mhm.
in at what? It's 430 plus 299, 300, 730 versus buying the EcoFlow Mini, which is more capable but less power. Do you have like a take on that? A scenario by which a person should go with the EcoFlow Pro and the external battery, or get the EcoFlow Mini? I'm also not super familiar with EcoFlow's line. I'm kind of getting more acquainted, but I'll yield to you. What are your thoughts?
Have you seen this cute little one? This is the River Mini.
I
This is
have
my
seen that
my
one. It's
yeah.
so costly that it puts it off my
I know.
radar. I'm like $300. Y'all are bugging. I think it was on sale for 199.
Yeah,
But
they sent me one, but I'll tell you what. So that's a tough decision. It all comes down to what you want to power with it, right? What do you want to
mhm.
power with your power stations?
Well, for me, it's a little bit tricky because I have so many that I'm pretty much covered on the low end. So me debating between the EcoFlow Mini and that, it just gives me like I'm not one of those people who set out to do certain things. I look for certain capacity, and then if my power ever went out, I would kind of weigh it accordingly. So it's like, okay, well, this one can do this. I'll put this in the basement on my mini fridge and my deep freezer. I don't have anything in mind because solar was always it was always like a fun kind of
Yeah.
money saving thing to get into. So I haven't entered into the space where I'm thinking about, okay, I'm not being super strategic in its application. I'm more so super strategic in the options that it allows me. So what I would say is the EcoFlow Mini intrigues me because the inverter capacity is higher than pretty much anything I own. Um, so that's what intrigues me. I could use it for anything that uses a lot of power. Like if my big fridge ever went down, I don't know how well I'll be able to power it. I have to hope that my EB120 would cover that surge with its 1,000-watt inverter. I'll stop talking now.
Sure. So where EcoFlow really shines is they make great inverters, right? Their inverters have a lot of surge capacity and they have some patented features. What I will tell you is flat out is the consideration between River series and Delta series comes down to the inverter, right?
Okay.
So I like the Delta series because I could run a microwave oven. I could run, some like high powered like that with it for a short duration, and so I could just chuck that in the trunk of my car, and then I could just go somewhere, hang out, bring fresh food, microwave it, and that. I found that the river really wasn't powerful enough to power my freezer, which was a disappointment because when the
Mm,
freezer kicks on, it has this huge surge current, and it really, it kind of could the kibosh. Where the river is good, and I have a river right now on my Wi-Fi router. Okay, so that's good for small appliances and stuff like that. So
yeah.
I'll say if you want to run a small appliance for a long period of time, the River series is your series. If you want to run a high power appliance and you want a decent amount of capacity, I think at 883 watt hours, the Delta Mini is a great deal, especially Costco price. That is what I would go with, right?
Ah, good logic. I like that.
Yeah.
I that kind of
Hmm.
gives me another framework to think about it. I mean, it's within the realm of how I process it, but just this
Yeah.
idea of like inverter. Okay, smaller, less capable inverter, longer runtime, more capable inverter, less runtime. And then realistically, like you're kind of getting to this idea that you would run a microwave or a fridge for a certain amount of time. Really, you need that inverter for a very small window because a fridge
Right.
settles down, the
Exactly.
microwave only runs for a few minutes, your deep freezer settles down. So that's good logic. I like that. I like that a lot. Thank
So
you.
there are two things you got to worry about with domestic refrigerators. One of them is a defrost cycle, and a defrost cycle pulls about 600 watts, right? And that's kind of problem with the River series. But the I would say if you're running a 12-volt fridge, the River series is perfect for that. You know, I have a 12-volt fridge I use.
I'm hoping at some point somebody will send me a 12-volt fridge. I don't know if I'm
Hey, you
gonna
never
buy
know.
one because I don't need to spend the money on it. So I'm gonna
That's
pass
true.
on that one.
Yeah, check Bouge
Uh,
RV.
yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I want their panels first and foremost. I emailed them. We'll see how it
Mm,
goes. Do you
all
have
right.
do you have a particular feature that you would like to see in a power station that's not there yet?
Oh, yeah. It's not so much a feature; it's a capability. Um, is to support higher voltage solar arrays because it kind of gives you flexibility with the panel. Like I at least like to see the solar voltage go up to 250 volts because right now in their biggest power station, EcoFlow solar capability goes up to 150 volts. Beyond that, in terms of features, and this is something I've been talking with EcoFlow about, is they have an app on their thing, right? They have an app where you could log in, but I wish there was an ability where you could connect it to your Wi-Fi router, right? And then your app would connect through directly through the Wi-Fi router rather than having to go to the cloud because this would bring a little more
Ah,
reliability for me, you know?
yeah. Listen, that's the story of my life.
Yeah.
I desire for all my things to not have this dependence on the internet. I hate when things have a dependence on the internet. That it drives me crazy. My Roku, what's that? Oh,
This
okay,
is
you
all
showing
my
me?
EcoFlow devices.
Nice, nice. Who does that look like, Wayne? Huh? Does that look familiar? I don't know if I've seen Wayne around today. But anyway, I had an issue with my Roku because I have a Plex server, which reminds me, guys, I showed you guys the Raspberry Pi, but I showed it to you in the case. So that was a bit of a misrepresentation of how dope this thing is. It's like this very small thing that's a single board computer. So it's super tiny. I showed it to you in the case, and I felt like, oh, you know what? They don't really know what it actually looks like. So anyway, I wanted to show that. I have a Raspberry Pi. It holds my. I have installed Plex on it. It holds my movies on an external hard drive, and we went on a trip to the beach, and I wanted to be able to take our movie collection with me, and I realized that the Roku will not work without internet connectivity. There's one way to get around it. This is not about Roku's and all that jazz, but I hate when we even have cameras in the house and they have to go all the way to the internet and then come back down to me for me to view the video. I think that's
Why?
ridiculous. It annoys me to no end. It's so
Yeah.
silly. I feel the same way about communication, which is why I'm into like mesh networking apps because they communicate directly over Wi-Fi if you're on the same Wi-Fi network or directly over Bluetooth and short range communication style. My favorite app for doing that is an app called Briar. I've played around with apps like Bridgify and Bridgify. I only got it to work on iOS reliably, and then there was an app that really had a whole lot of promise, but I think it was like some state sponsored way to get people on there and then track them. But it was FireChat. Don't quote me on that. But FireChat never worked well. It seemed to work
Oh
well when it
no.
was in the authorities' best interest, and then it never worked well for anybody practically. And then there's this super old app called Serval Mesh. I really wish their app took off, but they were mainly focusing on like developing countries and things like that. They got a little bit ambitious, I believe, but it still works and it's only on Android. But like being able to commute, like this idea that my wife could be downstairs and I'm upstairs and I have to go through the internet to get her a message, just it's ridiculous. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous. All right, I'll stop talking now. Let's see. I had some other questions for you. So you have a bunch of EcoFlow devices. Do you have any other devices that you stick around with, that you like to use, that you're a fan of, et cetera, et cetera?
I have this one. Remember this one?
Yes, nice. Good for you. The smart
Yeah,
list.
yeah, they sent me one. I have I borrowed a Jackery from a friend. Um, I have like inverters. I have like DIY stuff. Um, Listen, I'm not down with the Will Prowse crate, you know, solar generator in a crate thing. Milk crate, okay. But in my van, my last minivan, I had a Xantrex pure sine wave inverter and a house battery, and I use that, for various things. And it worked well. Huh. Other than that, I have like lithium batteries for my radios. I have lead acid batteries for the radios. What else do we have? We have a few other things. Mostly DIY modular stuff. You know, so.
Okay. So no Blue Eddies at the house. No.
You want to know something? Maybe if
How?
they release something exciting, maybe to
Okay.
me at least. And you want to know something? I'm kind of like I'm not because I bought the Delta Pro system, right? Well, and kind of like yeah, do I really need something else in the mix? That's like thousands of dollars. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
it's like
So would you, if they wanted to send you one, would you receive it and test it, or do you feel
yeah.
like you've kind of gathered all you need to know from watching other people talk about it?
If they send me one, sure, I'll test it. I'll give them an honest opinion. Just like I gave EcoFlow an honest opinion about their stuff. About the RF interference and some of the other things I'm testing for them. You know, another good one I saw on the market was Zendur. They're pretty. They seem to be a nice little startup.
Hmm. I'm vaguely
This
aware of them.
the Super Base
Vaguely.
Pro.
Uh
They
huh.
have it's like a it's like a little suitcase. You
Mm-hmm.
know. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen them around. I've seen them around for sure. Do you have a favorite power station and why?
Um, I would have to say the Delta Pro because there's just so EcoFlow Delta Pro. There's just so much you can do with it. Lithium iron phosphate, expandable, unofficially, up to 43 kilowatt hours. But the smart home panel integration, which I'm actually testing right now, I have a. I'm not hating on Blue Eddy, but I'm just saying. But yeah, I like the Delta Pro a lot. But you know what? On the on the end of the spectrum, I like the River Mini. I really like the River Mini. They're
So tell me why.
they're well because you want to know something, and I honestly I just throw this in my car, plug it in the cigarette lighter, it charges, and then when I go somewhere, I could just use this to power drones or something like that because I'm a drone pilot too, so
What do you mean when you say that? You're a drone pilot. You didn't say
So
I
I have
fly drones. You said I'm a drone pilot. So that I
right.
wanna you.
I actually have a certificate from the FAA, a license, so to speak, so I can fly drones commercially. I can, it's not a real pilot's license. Some people say, "Oh, you're not a real pilot." Yeah, I know. I don't sit in the cockpit, although I am working on that. But
Nice.
the part it's Part 107 remote pilot certificate. What you could do is it allows you to use your drone commercially, and I do some commercial stuff. I actually help inspect solar farms. You know,
Oh really? Huh.
yeah, but mostly those are mostly autonomous missions, meaning that it's pre-programmed in, and they have a camera with a drone with a thermal camera, and it goes and basically scans the array and looks for hotspots.
So I want to deviate for a second. You mentioned, I think I heard you mention engineering, and this was one of
Yeah.
the topics that I wanted to talk about. You're into a lot of stuff. Very savvy, very intelligent, very knowledgeable. You have chimed in on a lot of, at least two or three very important conversations surrounding
Hmm.
power stations and safety and all
And
of
no
that
filter.
jazz. Huh?
I have no filter.
I heard you say some other stuff that I appreciated about you that we won't get into. But so let me, I guess let's start from the simple aspect. Is there anything that you would offer up in the way of like safety procedures? What things should people be mindful of with these power stations? Are there things that they should really like pay attention to? I know we kind of take it for granted that, these little nice, cute boxes, but there's electricity coming out of those dips. I have to start being more mindful of it now because of my kids. I was just thinking about it. My daughter likes to press the buttons, and it's like that's a wall outlet. So I'm thinking about starting to put like little outlet covers on them, and maybe only letting her play with the ones that have outlet covers. But I'll yield to you. What do you think?
So the first thing I tell people is that if you can't do it yourself, don't. Right? Know your capabilities. Hire a professional if necessary. That said, doing it safely is another thing. Take time to educate yourself if you're considering a project. Learn the codes and such, and especially respect electricity, no matter where it comes from. If it comes from a solar power station, if it comes from the grid, it can kill you. And
Yeah.
in our house, what we did was we replaced all of the outlets with tamper resistant types, which have an integrated shutter, because those little plugs could come off. The thing they could come off. But this one has an integrated shutter where it's very hard unless you insert an actual plug to actually get it in. The other thing I want to say is grounding is not a black art, but there's really only one way to do it right, and
Okay.
that is documented in the National Electric Code. Okay, and like I said, if you can't do it yourself, find an electrician, or even you could go and go on the electrician forums and there's a DIY forums and such which have often have licensed electricians in them, and if you're doing work on your home, get a permit and get it inspected, because your insurance company, that's the first thing they're going to ask. You know, did you get it
Yeah.
inspected? If your house burns down, did you get a permit?
Yeah.
Unpermitted, okay, denied.
Yeah,
You
that
know,
sucks.
so that's what I tell people. But above all, I tell people, be safe. Electricity is our friend and our foe. Be safe, and if you can, if you can hire an electrician, great. If not, there's none wrong with DIY, right? As long as it's done correctly. So,
I'm hiring an electrician. I've been wanting to get into this
mhm.
transfer switch stuff. I don't know enough about it to move forward. Prepping on the Creek is talking about doing a video soon about it, about his transfer switch situation. But I would love to get more things on my in my home being powered from solar, because we are really a low energy usage house.
Mhm.
So I do feel like we could kind of manage some switches being like just permanently, for the most part, during the day on solar. So I really want to look into that. I'm going to look into it one day. And I don't think it's as costly as I think it is, me having to be mindful of my coins. What's that?
So this is Sense. Actually, this
Oh,
is a
yeah.
meter that installs in your panel and
Mm-hmm.
tells you how much you're actually using. I'm not really using a lot of electricity right now. We are a low energy consumption household, right? So I get what you're saying.
How
You
much,
know,
how much, I can't read the screen, but I can see it clearly. How much electricity are you using right now?
right now I'm using about 750 watts,
Isn't that
about 800
crazy?
watts.
That's kind of
Yeah,
like how my home is, for sure.
I could run this on an EcoFlow Blue Eddy right now.
Do you have a transfer switch in your home or anything like that?
Yeah, I have. We have two transfer switches. We have one on the meter collar, which was installed by the utility. It's called GenerLink, right?
Hmm.
Right. So GenerLink. What it does is it you can connect a 30 amp plug to a generator, or to a set of Delta Pros, or Blue Eddy EB240 with their Fusion box, right? And you could run that to your house. But I'm also testing the EcoFlow Smart Home Panel, which is 10 circuits run from Delta Pros. And eventually, I'm going to have two of them installed, because I ordered, via the Kickstarter, I ordered two. And I'm going to have them connected to the panel, and basically we're going to set it up to run 20 circuits in the house, which is most of the load. So, you
Do
know.
you have any idea of like, because I know you talked about Sense. I looked at my panel, and my panel is extremely basic. I would dare say it's
Hmm.
super old compared to, like, I saw Silver Symbol talk, like, show his panel, and his panel is all like spacious, and there's space to put clamps and stuff like that. My panel is not that. My panel is like super tight. I don't think I can get anything in there as it relates to Sense. Um, would you say that your panel is kind of more modern, or is it like an older panel?
So our house was built in 1998, and
Okay,
yeah, so
that's pretty modern.
it's kind of modern. I mean, it's not 60s, but it doesn't have like some of the newer upgrades, like are like arc fault breakers, AFCI, right? Um, I think that's really it, that it doesn't have compared to modern codes. But Sense really only takes two breaker slots, right? It takes two breaker slots, and then it has what you call current transformers, which are like clamps that go around the main input wires into your house,
Hmm.
okay, into your panel. And what it does, and the technology is quite cool, although I don't think it's that reliable. What it does is based on the signature pattern of how your device draws electricity, right? Like, for example, a fridge would kick on and then come down, right? Whereas a toaster would go up, spike a little bit, and then gradually come down. They identify appliances that way, and in their app, you can see here they have like a continuous graph of how this is going. Contrast, okay? You
There you
see?
go.
So it's basically like an EKG, right, for your electricity.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't take a lot to install Sense. What were you asking about your panel now? Is my panel more modern, or what are you saying?
I imagine if I'm pretty sure my house was probably built. Babe, do you know when this house was built? Do you remember? My wife is speculating that it might be the 40s, but she's not sure. So the house it's not a newer house. 90s, I
Knob
would
and tube
consider to
wiring.
be, yeah, yeah, it's a whole thing. I kind of want
Okay.
to look into. I need to start researching electricians because I want to look into the feasibility of upgrading my panel just so I know exactly what switch goes to what. I haven't really done that. It's like a long dragging project that I do. Like whenever we trip a breaker, I'll go down there and I'll be like, "Oh, okay, this is for the fridge in my computer area," but
Hmm.
they're not labeled properly or anything. It's a whole thing. So I want to look into trying to be able to upgrade my panel. I was thinking about that. So yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
I looked at
if you
Sense.
need it, I mean, there are ways to extend the life of an old panel, but if it's like an old, 1940s, I doubt it's 1940s because then you'd have like knob and tube wiring and such.
Probably not 1940s. No,
Yeah,
it
probably like
looks normal.
1960s.
Yeah.
If it's Some of them might be upgraded. Like my brother just bought a house built in like the 70s, and it was kind of, you could tell that it was aging, the wiring, you know. But
That's crazy. I don't want to think
yeah,
about that. Jeez, aging wires. That scares me.
yeah.
That's really. Oh wait. Do you have? I have a question for you. Do you have any? I'm trying to do this video on like solar usage tips and tricks.
Hmm.
And the reason why I'm trying to do that is because when I got into solar, I'm super into being efficient and smart and thinking about ways to kind of like tweak and, make things more impactful. Do you have any tips as it relates to using solar that come to mind?
Using or generating solar.
Using, for example, I remember telling my father in law that he just got solar panels on his home. And I remember telling him, like, kind of try and shift your usage around so that you're doing more of your big load items during the day versus in the evening when you know how that whole time of use thing works. Um,
Yeah. So, and this is not really a plug for EcoFlow, even though it kind of is. The smart home panel that I'm testing has a feature where you can switch to the Delta Pros during the daytime. So this means that you can optimize your usage of the solar power, the battery stations during the daytime, right?
mhm.
So when you're generating from solar, do that. There are other devices that do that too. I believe Powerwall does it. But as far as tips, you could even go really old school. You know, you could just like have like a transfer switch, a manual transfer switch, with selected circuits and flip them. You know, during the day, that's what a lot of people do. What I'll tell people is, if you really want to save, you could start off looking to see if your utility has a time of use plan, right? And a time of use plan basically means that they charge different rates at different times of the day. That could help you save a lot of money if you have batteries to use. So you charge it during the off-peak time, and then you discharge during the peak time. As far as using the solar, I would definitely say, if you have ability to do programmable stuff, you could program to use it during the day, and at night, you use the grid power, which is what I kind of been doing.
So another one that came to mind for me is what I do is if I'm trying to bank solar power, right? I'll
Hmm.
charge up my power stations, and once they hit like 80%, then I'll start using stuff on them. That was really important to me when I only had like two power stations because I wanted to, they were like my only means of emergency power if we lost electricity. Back when I had only the Bodens and the first generation Rock Pals or whatever it was. Actually, it wasn't the first one because they got some older ones too. So I would wait until I got like a pretty good charge on the power station, and then I would start using it. Versus as soon as the sun came up, start using it, it's drained. You know what I mean? It's like this whole thing of not having enough power in it for if there actually was an emergency. Another thing that I do is because I have multiple power stations, and even if you have two, um, you could kind of take one and then not use that one at all, unless it's just a pass through power, because then you always have something that has power in it. Because I'm greedy, I like to use all my power, so I have to stop doing that because if anything ever happened, then I'll have like 6 or 7 power stations that are empty. For most people, they'll have like two that are empty or one that's empty, and you don't want that. But that's just me. I'm greedy. I like using the power.
So you want to know something? That's a sound strategy, and Ben Thorman, who's another moderator at the EcoFlow forums, he suggested that strategy. He said, yeah, if you have two power stations, charge one up and discharge the other one and swap them out. If you're in
Mm,
solar and you have emergency, and that makes a lot of sense. I literally did not think about that.
I
You know?
know, right?
Yeah, I think that's great. And another thing you could do is like if you have like the Blue Eddies that you could charge the battery separately, or even the Kickstarter EcoFlows that could do that. Because there was one Kickstarter EcoFlow battery that you could charge separately via solar, right?
Really? I did not know that. That kind
Yeah,
of rings a bell, but because when that device was out, I wasn't in the market, so I don't pay
yeah.
attention to the details. But that's interesting.
So if you have more than one, you could charge that up, outside and swap them out.
Do you know, actually, someone asked me, I asked someone, I may have even asked it in the forum, the EcoFlow group, but do you know if on those EcoFlow Pros with the extra battery, how the drain profile works? Does it try to
Um,
stay the same, or does it pull from the thing and then drain the main?
no, it's supposed to basically stay within 10% of one another. Um, in practice, I've kind of seen it deviate from that, so I kind of have that investigating because there's some posts on the forum about that. So we're kind of looking into that, but they're saying it's not supposed to really deviate within 10% of each other. You
Gotcha,
know, yeah.
gotcha.
But the interesting thing is if you're using smart home panel, right, and using two EcoFlow Delta Pros connected in a parallel configuration, so you could actually have two Delta Pros connected to the smart home panel. They will actually closely track one another. So, and they'll switch in and out to, if you use them in a parallel mode, to basically drain consistently at the same level.
Which brings
So,
me back to something you mentioned, which is a capability that you wanted on these power stations, which is to take in higher voltage, right? So it makes me think about this idea of, because that means you can put more solar into it. These devices, the EcoFlow Delta Pro and the Blue Eddy AC200 Max and the 300, they have this large capacity, but they don't really have the ability to take in a lot of solar, which I think is like problematic. Now, where does the EcoFlow fit in how much solar they can take in? Because I think they had a higher amperage allotment, which allows you to take in more power. What do you have to add to that?
so yeah. So okay. So I'll tell the Delta Pro does 150 volts up to 15 amps, right? And that kind of makes it's actually quite generous when you come to think of it. But you have to choose your solar panels carefully. Otherwise, you're going to start to
Yeah.
run into a situation where you are over paneling, like really, really over paneling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then and you're not able to use the full capability of your solar panels, yet you have plenty of reserve capacity. The reason I wanted a higher voltage is because then you would be able to use a wider variety of solar panels. Like you could
Right.
use, some of these big commercial solar panels that are like, 50 volts open cell, and then you put like, four of them in series, and that would rock. You know what I'm saying? So
And those
it's
panels are
like,
cheaper, especially if you can get them used.
right, exactly. Yeah. So that's why I wanted that. But What was the specific question with the voltage?
So the idea of my particular situation is okay. You have this EcoFlow Delta Pro, which is what, like 3,000 watt hours, but you can only
Mhm.
charge it at what, maybe what, 900 watts. What is
Oh
150
yeah, yeah,
times
yeah. Right.
15?
So
I don't know.
the Delta Pro does 1,600 watts of solar, and the Delta Max does 800, and it's a 2,000 watt hour power station, and the regular Delta does 400. The um, the Delta Mini does 300, and the believe it or not, the Delta, not the Delta, the River series does 200 watts, except for the River Mini. Now the thing about the River series is that because of the the older ones used like the regular River Pro and the River Max and such, their voltage on the battery was limited to 25 volts, like on the MPPT controller, right? On the solar controller was
Hmm.
limited to 25 volts. So that kind of limited your choices of solar panels. So you basically had to run the solar panels in parallel. And this is another
Yeah.
reason
Yeah.
that the Delta Mini might be a better, thing if you're especially using solar.
Yeah. So that the Delta Mini can take in 300 watts, right? Did I hear you say that?
Yeah, but it has a higher voltage range. Meaning, I believe it does up to 75 volts. So you could connect you could connect, I don't know, like four 20-volt panels in series. No, sorry, not four, three 20-volt panels in series, and it'll be fine.
Interesting. So that in my situation, because I have mostly 200 watt panels, and I have four 100 watt panels, but they're like different ones. I have two Renogy's normal. I have one Renogy Eclipse, and then I have one HQST. If I still had all three of my Renogy's, that would be ideal for that EcoFlow Delta Mini to be able to
Mm,
put those in series. Because, like Ria's saying, 20 volts, it gives you 60. So the EcoFlow Delta Mini having the capacity for 75 volts, that's actually perfect. Contrasted to something like the EB120, which has a limit on paper of 60 volts. So you can't put realistically three panels in series on that device, which is weird. Now, some people have mentioned that they kind of tell you 60 volts because they don't want you wilding out, but it's actually 68. I can't tell you that. Yeah, I don't. I wouldn't try that if I were you. Me trying it is a whole different thing. Go ahead, Rita.
what I would tell you about that, Ive, is you could I think what they did that for is like for cold weather usage, because you know that the VOC, the open circuit voltage, in cold weather is actually a little higher, right? Because
Yeah,
when they test
yeah.
these panels, so you actually get higher voltage out of the panels in cold weather. So they probably made that in mind for that. So they think, well, people
Interesting.
will put 60 volts of panels. We just make it a little higher because they might be in New Jersey in the winter time trying to
Right.
do that.
Yeah, that makes sense because my panels have always performed. I can't say they've always performed better, but they perform consistently better during the winter months. Now, there are some
Hmm.
summer months when they just rock out, but I think that's because of the sun being high and the luminance and all that jazz.
Hmm.
But that's a good point. It's a good point. I'll see what questions folks have. I've enjoyed this thoroughly. We'll see what's going on in the comments, and then we'll kind of wrap this thing up. I want to thank everybody for the super chats. I know Stacks dropped a couple on me. I think 2% gave me something as well. I can thank you for the super chat. I missed an early one. Del, my wife came over, was like, thank you. I do have Ria's buy me a coffee link down in the description. If you guys found value in the information that she shared and you want to say thanks with coins, you can do it that way. I need to figure out if you have any of those payment options. So I'll message you. I won't send it through Buy Me a Coffee. I'll
Yeah.
send it directly to you. But I'll talk with you
Okay.
about that in the chat.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to mention is my channel's about 30 subscribers away from 10,000. So I would
Nice.
appreciate the love if you guys are willing to, to help me get there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's get Rhea over the 10K. Man, that's I'm excited. I love seeing people's channels succeed and thrive, man. YouTube is challenging. So when people
Yeah.
get out there and they find like a lane that they can occupy and resonate with people, it's always a cause for a celebration. So y'all please check out Rhea's channel, watch some videos, hit the subscribe button if the content is like groovy to you. But we should be able to accomplish that for sure. For sure. All
Yeah.
right. LVP say you subbed earlier. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
that. Appreciate that. Not sure what the myelin is. Somebody must be asking about the myelin. It's this thing I got for I got it for $250, Rhea. It's like a
Oh,
budget power station.
it's like a Smartless Part Two or
Pretty
Bobat or one of those or a
yeah,
Wackery.
smartless. We'll see if it's a rackery for sure. I'm definitely putting it through. Satit said that he had an issue with his and he reached out to
Yeah.
the company and he's waiting to hear back from them. So I'm
Mm,
definitely monitoring that thread closely. All right, all
perfecto.
right. Oh, look at this. It's flattering. I'm in awe of your guest, Task Guy. Totally amazing. So much knowledge. Rhea, you should be featured somewhere for girls or women to hear you and become a fan and join STEM programs. Indeed.
Well, you want to know some? We actually have a local um, contact with the space station with a local school that's coming up. So the teacher's pretty excited. We're gonna be talking about that. I'm gonna be probably talking about that on my channel sometime soon, but I'm really excited to be part of that. You know,
Dope. That's dope. Yeah, I like just watching some of your content and just seeing how vast your knowledge set is and how many things you're into is really inspiring. So, tip of the hat to you, Rhea, for sure.
yeah.
All right, what's prepping on the creek? What about wait? What about Eton multi-band radios for just
Yeah.
listening? I'll yield that one to you.
So I'll tell you, the Eton radios, some of them are nice. They're, some of them could get pricey. If you're buying a shortwave radio and you have the cash, get one with SSB capability, single sideband. I will tell you why. With SSB, you could listen to airport dispatch, like the air traffic controllers, long range communications. You could listen to number stations. You could listen to ham radio. You could listen to a lot of stuff. With the AM only radios, you could kind of listen to some stuff, but you won't get everything. So you get one with SSB. I do like the Eton radios, but I also really like C Crane. Okay, and C Crane makes a great SSB radio. The Skywave, I believe it's called.
Let's see what else. Shots at Javi has his call sign. That's what's up. That's interesting, man. Oh, we'll see. We'll see. Let's see. Let's see. I think that's it. If anybody asked a question that didn't get addressed, we'll take a few moments to give you a chance to pop it down more recently. Um,
Yeah,
Wayne says he's gonna subscribe to
thank
your
you.
channel. Appreciate that.
What
Thank
brand
you,
of
Wayne.
radios? So don't buy them from Best Buy, okay? I'm like Best Buy. No, no, no. Um, so if you really want to get a good ham radio, I mean like the $25 Baofengs are nice, but the other radios like the Yaesu makes some good ones. YAESU. And they're like a close to $100. Alinco is another brand, and they are really solid radios for about $100, right? And you can buy them. Usually, there's ham radio stores online. There is Ham Radio Outlet is a big store. There's DX Engineering. There is Gigaparts. There is Gosh, there's another big one. There's my friend KM4 MPF Sales. I mean, but if you look in the magazines, you'll see them. Um, but yeah, so buy from a specialty ham radio store. You know, Ham Radio Outlet, DX Engineering, Gigaparts, I think are the three big ones. And there used to be a couple others, but I think they went out of business. So
Do you
there's some
have a
local ones.
video on that yet, Ria, or do you have a community post or a web post or anything you can point people to?
So I have a little bit of a dilemma because I'm involved with the National Association. I can't endorse manufacturers or retailers, so I can't get them free advertising. But I could tell you that these are the places I buy from, right? So I don't put up a video saying buy from these ham radio stores because then other ham radio stores will ask me. What I will say is that if people who are interested in ham radio look on various ham radio websites, right? They will find that the names of these dealers. But like I mentioned, the big ones, right? There are some smaller ones too. There is one locally I go to called KJI Electronics. It's a small business. And if you look also, if you want to get one in person, we actually have like these pop-up sales at events called Ham Fests. And if you just Google, you know, Ham Fests, right? It'll probably come up with the ARRL page that tells you where the Ham Fest's located, and they usually have people selling radios there, new radios, and used radios as well too. But I'll drop a link in for the search page. You could find one in your area. You search by zip code and such like that too.
You can also send me anything that you feel is relevant, and then I can share it. Just like, hey, these are some
Yeah.
links, check them out, type stuff. I do want to ask you because Wayne is telling me that your quality of your stream is really good. What are you streaming from? He actually told me mine is garbage, but whatever.
Oh, you mean right now?
Yeah, like what hardware are you using? Are you using like a certain type of light? Like how's that working out for you?
I have a light here and a light. Well, I had a light there. I put it out, but I have a light up there. I'm using a Sony ZV-1 camera. I'm using
Nice.
So you know what? I actually took the course from Marquez Brownlee about upping your video content quality, and he had a lot of good stuff.
Really?
I mean, he's amazing, and he's right local in New Jersey too.
That is
So I
true.
use actually a shotgun mic, and you could kind of see it's almost in frame. It's kind of in frame, right?
I see.
And
Yeah, I see what you're talking about now as you point to it.
yeah, so I use that, and that's how I get my sound. But yeah, the
So the
ZV-1 is,
Sony
is nice camera.
ZV-1, I thought about buying it, but and I may still endeavor to
Don't
upgrade.
get that one. Get the
I don't.
EV10.
You're right. You're absolutely right. But because none of them will actually satisfy my a broad range of what I would want to do with the camera, I don't like either of them. But I'm
Mm.
streaming from a Canon T3i. I have bars on the side. You know what I mean? It's a whole thing, and I kind of want to be able to have some ease of use. So I have to debate with myself about whether I'm going to get a single use camera, which I feel like is a waste of money, or if I'm going to wait for a multi-use camera that is actually worth me spending my coins on. So I have this dilemma.
Yeah, I'm not into spending money on cameras, right? I mean, this is good enough for me. I have a camcorder I use sometimes too. I might look for a good used camera sometime that I could run on cheap. So,
Yeah.
but this is the ZV-1 was good price range. But if I recommend to people buy the ZV E10. The E10 has interchangeable lenses and all kind of stuff, and it's
Hmm.
not expensive. It's like $800 compared to like $3,000 for like an A7C.
Yeah,
You know.
it's there's no real middle ground in the camera. The
Mm.
return, it's like a scale, uh, some kind of fancy word Casey Neistat used, diminishing return or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, that like the higher you go up, the less benefits you get. But there's really no $1,000 to $1,200 to $1,400 camera that's actually worth the money. I would never want to spend that much. But if I'm going to entertain spending like 700 or 800, and there's no $1,000 or 1199 camera option that really takes me up in quality, it's just like weird. Anyway, it's a whole thing. How much did the course cost with Marquez Brownlee? Was it a paid course?
No, it's on Skillshare. So if you have a Skillshare
Oh,
subscription,
okay, okay. I may
yeah,
have to
I think
like
they
sign
offer
up for
free.
the free trial to check out
Yeah,
that course and see what he says.
yeah, they're good. I got 2 months free trial, so I did that, and I still I take some courses, but I get some through work too. They have a lot of stuff. You know.
Okay, let's see. That's my problem with power stations. You can't charge them within a 4 to 5 hour window. I don't think we really touched on that, but I need to wrap this up. It was
Yeah, yeah,
excellent hanging out with you. I see that Bro Let's Go uses the 70D. Yeah, that's nice. That's
yeah.
so
It's nice.
costly though. You know what I mean? It's like it's such an old camera. The 80D still costs like a grand. You know, he's like, well, why would I go DSLR for a grand when I could get something else that's a little more future forward and easy to use? All right. Anyway,
Right.
Ria, thank you so much. I hope you guys have gone to check out her channel to hopefully subscribe. Like I said earlier, she is really into making sure that you guys learn something as it relates to the things that she talks about. And as you saw from the stream, she's super knowledgeable. So
I'm gonna have more beginner stuff, by the way. So you
my
guys who
wife
are
came over and
interested,
said, "Girl power, weirdo."
hey, hey, that's right.
Y'all have it hard. Okay,
Yeah, I
that's because
know.
y'all talk too
Oh
much.
my.
You wouldn't have it hard if you just a little more concise. My wife sends her love.
All
I send
right.
my love too. It's just not for girl power, but girl power. Hey, whatever, girl power. I'll talk
Listen,
with you
I've
soon. Go ahead.
I've let me tell you one more thing.
Hmm.
If you are interested to get your license, I'll be
Okay.
more than happy to help you.
Hey, I dig
Okay?
it. I dig it. I I I'm interested in figuring out what tech I'm gonna get that
Hmm.
kind of. But you said $500. That thing was sweet looking, but I don't know if it was $500 worth of sweet looking. And the bow
Get the
things just look
$25 one.
real. Yeah, I'm a
I
mid-range kind of
know.
guy, so I would probably want to spend like $150 to get
They
something
have
that's a
those
little
too.
nicer, a little more compact, a little more stylish. And then I feel like I would probably have to get two because I would want my wife to have one. Okay,
Yeah.
last question. What is the realistic range in the city as it relates to two people who have a license or whatever who pass the test communicating with each other? I know things change and all that, it has to do with terrain and all that jazz, but what do you think?
Yeah, yeah. So with a handheld radio, I would say about a mile or two, simplex, radio to radio, right? But in a city, usually, and I lived in New York City. Okay, I lived in Manhattan and Queens. Um, the the range you get if you're using a repeater station, right, could cover the entire city and then some. So a lot of
Oh,
people they use
wow.
repeaters. If you're doing simplex with a 5 watt radio, you'll probably get a couple of miles. You know, so it's really not the thing in the city you do have to watch out for is a lot of interference.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And on that note, I'm going to end the stream. Y'all be beautiful.